Good morning, ladies, gentlemen, and non binary individuals alike. Welcome behind the scenes to the Behind the Screams podcast. In this podcast, we roll back the curtain on the nature of communication. Today's podcast, we will aim to understand the flow of information on retention on a weekly basis. I'm your host, Patricia Porter, and today we're focusing on a conversation on internal communication as well as mass communication and how those two communication fields work well with each other. Believe it or not, communicators, specifically communication researchers or scholars, can be sometimes resembled to psychologists. Now, what I mean by this is that sometimes, in order to be an effective external communicator, you need to look within yourself internally. Understanding your own personal behavior might help you understand the behavior of somebody else, which in turn can make you both a better communicator and a better receiver of information. So today we are honored to have the Attribution Theory expert, social media extraordinaire, Miss Esty Austin here with us. She's here to enlighten us on how we can apply this theory to our personal and professional lives. I think this will be an interesting conversation because no matter who you are, where you are in life, where you work, how poorly or how well you communicate, it's always beneficial to learn more about our inner selves. So good morning. Hey, Esty. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So I want to ask you a few questions about attribution theory. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. So in your own words, can you explain to the audience what the attribution theory is?
So, yes, the attribution theory, in my own brief words, is really just understanding how people interpret things that they interpret and their reasonings and the whys on why they do the things they do, why they have certain behaviors, why they react and respond in certain situations the way they do. There's actually two broad categories of the attribution theory. One is going to be internal, where that's more so based off of people's personal characteristics and different traits about them. So that's all internal, the internal reasoning behind people's actions. And then the external factors are things that people can't necessarily control that can cause them to react the way they do. So an example with internal attribution could be like if somebody like myself, I tend to be late for work all the time. So somebody looking on the outside looking in may say, oh, she's just lazy, or, that they may think that that's just a characteristic of me, but they're not looking at any external factors. There could have been like a car accident on the freeway or something. I could have had car trouble, something else that could have caused me to behave or respond where I was actually late. So looking at the reasonings why people make the choices and behave the way they do.
That's great. Yeah, I mean that makes total sense. I'm also late to work. Mine's because I'm actually late, but no, like you make a great point. Um, so is attribution theory similar to the study of psychology? Do you think?
Very much so. The attribution theory actually began in the field of social psychology because it takes a look at why people's behaviors are the way they are, especially in social settings and social interactions. So it definitely started with psychology as a whole to kind of study people and their different interactions between professional interactions, personal interactions, their responses to things. It all, they kind of go hand in hand with one another.
Hmm. That's great. So, how does one go about researching their own personal thoughts and feelings?
For me, I feel the best way personally is self-reflection. I know, for example, with me, I'm not really good on my feet when it comes to certain things or how I react and how I respond. Like for example, I was teaching in school, and in middle school, kids they kind of spunky, and I'm not good on my feet. So later on, I might be telling a story to my friend about what was said, and now I got a good comeback. So for me,
Yeah.
I would say it's like a lot of self-reflection, but that can happen in a lot of different ways, whether it's just taking the time to actually think about something after the fact, or looking at it from trying to look at it and be open-minded and looking at something from perspectives other than just your own. Another thing that can help when it comes to researching those feelings are talking to people, whether you choose to talk to someone close, like a friend, a family, or someone you think that just may not have any bias in the situation.
So, do you think therapy is a good way to unpack your true feelings then?
I think that it can be. I think it varies differently from person to person, but overall, I would say absolutely so. I feel like therapy allows us a safe space to be able to open up and speak about different experiences that we've had.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. And I think that's a really great point. But maybe it doesn't even have to be a therapist that you talk to, just somebody that you trust with that info and somebody that you can really unpack your emotions with. So that's really helpful. Thank you. Once you understand more about your dispositional factors, like your personality, your biology, and your thoughts or feelings, how can you use that to better understand people?
So I think that once you understand those things about yourself, it can help you when it comes to being more open-minded with the people that you're communicating with, looking at things from a total perspective and looking at things as a whole instead of just assuming that you know best or that your response to things or your decisions are the best. I feel like it helps you to be less biased actually and more empathetic to others and their experiences as well. So I feel like it helps to kind of just streamline that process of communicating with others. Another example that I can give about being a better communicator once you know your own personal dispositional factors. Like for me, for instance, I work in leadership at my job. So I do a lot of training, a lot of coaching, one on one, a lot of um, growth and development within the company. So knowing about my own personal dispositional factors, how I say things, how I react, how I would come off to somebody, and then taking in mind how that would be perceived by them. I have to take that in mind when it comes to communicating. There's times where I will have to give news that may not be the best, or I may have to tell someone about something that they did wrong or what a bad impact could have been to us as a company based off of something that they did, right? So it can feel like I'm attacking someone, but I have to be mindful when I'm communicating based off of the things that I know about myself. I know how I can interact with this person versus how I can interact with this person. I know that if I word this one way to this gentleman, with this young lady, I may have to word it differently because she may become upset if I word it the same way. It's not a one size fits all when it comes to communicating. And I think knowing that and knowing when to shift gears and when to apply the things that you know about the person that you're speaking with in addition to what you know about yourself, I think those are some of the factors that can help when it comes to being a good or a better communicator.
That's great. I mean, I think we all could be better empathetic listeners. So do you think that there's a way that you can use those ideas to be a better communicator?
Absolutely. I think that being more empathetic is going to be the biggest thing. And I feel like, in addition to that, is knowing more about yourself, being more self aware of how people perceive you or how you may come off. Like for me, I know my communication style and I learn people enough to know how I can communicate with them, how they'll react, how what I'm saying may come across to them. And I try to be very aware of that. So knowing other things as well, like things that may trigger me or things that may trigger the person that I'm interacting with. Just being self-aware, empathetic, and knowing how to communicate in different settings as well. I feel like all of those together make more room for better communication. There's less room for having conflict or misunderstandings. Just if you take the time to get to know others aside from just the surface level.
That's great. Yeah. So let's think a bit externally now. We've talked about attribution theory in the realm of internal communication, but externally, how does the attribution theory relate to mass media and mass communication?
So I think that it relates very closely. I think that once we have a better understanding of people, their behaviors, and how they perceive things, it can also shed light on communicating in a mass media type of instance where you can know what type of content will influence someone, how they may potentially react to it. And then also it can help with being more mindful to share content that won't have such negative effects or outcomes for people once you know like how they can perceive and respond to it. So I think also just being mindful to pay attention to the different trends as well. When it comes to content that's posted, all of that kind of goes into basically understanding someone's behaviors and the way they would see things online.
So social media is constantly changing and evolving. It feels like each day there are new trends and new flows of information that we need to keep track of. So, in your expert opinion, how does understanding people's behaviors affect communication efforts on social media?
I think it kind of goes back to the last question, just being mindful of knowing what type of content people will engage with, what keeps their attention, which kind of posts and content people are more likely to interact with. And then based off of someone's engagement or what their habits and patterns are online and on social media, just being mindful to that as far as when you're actually sharing content and posting things online.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a way to use data and analytics from social media to better understand attribution theory and why people behave or respond the way they do?
Absolutely. I think the data analytics, when it comes to social media, can be used to address different patterns, showing the different trends of engagement. It can also highlight content that may be triggering for some, content that may have better effects on people, and different content that may not, based off of how someone would typically respond in those situations. So yeah, I think definitely paying attention to the content that and the likes, the comments that people leave, especially the content that they're sharing, how someone's algorithm is kind of curated to them, paying attention to that as a whole can definitely be done with the analytics and seeing, how the attribution theory kind of comes into play with that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, for sure. My last question is, what advice would you offer to scholars, researchers, and common folk out there who might want to apply the attribution theory to their personal and professional lives?
My biggest piece of advice when applying this theory to your personal or professional life would be to, first and foremost, just, it sounds cliche, but be kind. You don't know what someone's going through, where their mindset is. You don't know until you get to know somebody. You don't know like what things will make them react a certain way, what their response are going to be. You don't know if something that you say or do can cause someone to react negatively or respond with judgment. So to look at people, to be empathetic, look at them from an open mind. So I think all of that together kind of helps ensure that people can communicate, they can feel safe, they can feel that they're not going to be judged for their reactions or for how they perceive things. It kind of just makes communicating as a whole a little bit easier when there's just more understanding all the way around from all sides.
That's such a great point and a good way to end, I think, because that's all the time we have today. I want to give a huge thank you to you and a virtual round of applause for coming here and talking about the attribution theory. You gave us a lot of tangible advice and insight to the attribution theory, and we're grateful that you had the time to share your expertise with us. So thank you. I think it's so
Thank you
easy to
for
go
having
through
me.
the motions and live a fast-paced life, like you said. Um, I think, ironically enough, I host a podcast every week, and I don't always feel like I'm being the best effective communicator. So I think what you told me today and all this advice you've given me will actually help me moving forward with my future podcasts. So I thank you. I can definitely see myself taking more time to look inward and address what's going on internally so I can be a better communicator internally and externally. I also really resonated when you spoke about being an empathetic leader and being non judgmental, and how we also need to be good listeners to communicate. I think those are amazing advices for our young people listening, and just honestly, everybody can take advice from that. So I really appreciate that. Don't judge.